Welcome to North Fulton Serves, a podcast where we share stories about people making a difference in our community and learn about how we can get more involved. I'm your host, Jason Binder, and with me today is Kathi Cook from the city of Alpharetta. Welcome, Kathi.
Thank you.
Today we're going to be discussing different things that you're involved with, placemaking within the city, and especially get into hopefully the Alpha Loop and hear what's going on with that.
That sounds good to me.
Sounds good? Well, good. Well, Kathi is the Community Development Director. I've worked with her for probably over 5 years now as Design Review Board and then City Council. And she does a fantastic job with trying to balance out the community wants with development needs and trying to create a sense of home on there. So I'm just start with complimenting you.
Well, thank you. Now I'm glad that I accepted the offer for the podcast.
You want to finish the show now, or should we keep going?
Yeah, I'm off to a good start.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into community development?
I actually started working with the city 28 years ago. It was actually in 91. I moved to Alpharetta in the early 80s. Actually went to the old Milton High School. So that's fun to kind of see that getting redeveloped. But I started off at Southern Tech, was going to be a civil engineer, started working for the city, was actually going to school at night, and then just became so interested in what was going on at the city that I decided to stay there. Started off as a construction inspector. So a lot of my, probably the first 10, 15 years was actually out in the field, which is fun. It makes it fun. And it helps with when you're planning trails or you're looking at any kind of zoning applications that you actually have an idea of, do they have to have a detention pond? Does it have to be here? Does it have to look bad? So I think that's really, really helped with my career.
And that shows, I guess, when we're looking at the development application through the different phases that people bring in, that from the very beginning to final decision with council, you've been involved at almost every level of that.
Absolutely. So most of the people that work for me, actually, I've had every one of their jobs. So I've been in code enforcement, land disturbance inspector, reviewed hydrology. So that helps to give me all the background information I need to make good decisions.
So now you said you moved to Alpharetta as a teenager.
I did.
And went to Old Milton High School.
Yes.
Now, did that experience help now as you're seeing things grow in Alpharetta and what it's turning into, that we can keep a little piece of our history or what has been in Alpharetta?
I think it was important because, having that background, I know what it was like when I was in high school. And I think that we've been really successful with still having that same community. I still see people and talk to people that were in the community when I was in high school and even when I started with the city. So it did give me a good sense. I mean, when I was in high school, the only thing we had on Milton Avenue, of course, was the old fire station. We had a Mike's Auto Repair. And I laugh sometimes that the most excitement on Milton Avenue when I started out as a construction inspector, we had to close the road off because there might be an oil spill from Mikey's garage or something. I mean, that was it. But you didn't have to worry about traffic then, of course, because not many people, going through on Milton Avenue at that time. So it does give me a sense to see kind of where we were and to try to still reach out to those people that were in the community back then, because that's important because, they were the people that I looked up to. So I still want to make sure that, that they're happy with what's going on in Alpharetta. And it's kind of neat, even we've talked about like Sue Rainwater that lives right now in front of City Hall. But,
right.
I mean, that's pretty cool to see that, she was the person that hired me so many years ago and that she's still so involved in the community. And we see that with a lot of the different people in the community. So that's fun.
So in the early 90s, probably one of the first big things or one of the big things that popped up at that time was the North Point Mall area.
Yes.
And how is that now that we're returning back to focus on the North Point Mall area?
I think it's fun. It's so fun to go back and look at it now because, of course, in 91, we weren't thinking about people living near where they work and where they're shopping and going to restaurants. So it's really fun now because we didn't put in a lot of that infrastructure. Put in a fabulous, the road is beautiful, has the medians that are landscaped. So what we're doing now is looking at all the how do we make it more walkable? Getting those sidewalks in there, connecting to the greenway. So that's fun. I remember walking through during construction. So it's fun now to think about that I'll be able to have an impact on that next stage. And it's going fabulous. We've had such a great feedback from the public. Because it's all about, if we put all these plans together, if the public's not on board and hasn't given their input, then we really don't have a plan that's what they want. So it's been fun.
So you've done a good job with the different conceptual plans of making sure that we have the input from the community in there. And
Yes.
North Point's one of them. As you said, we have good bones, I would say, with the infrastructure, with the greenway right next to it, to see what the next phase for North Point is. So what, based on everyone's input, and now that we've had times to kind of put plans together, how do you see that for North Point placemaking? What are going to be some of the big things that we see that we would develop in there?
I think the biggest thing is fixing the sidewalks along North Point. When I say sidewalks, these are more a placemaking. I mean, they're where people want to walk on those sidewalks because they're interesting. I mean, the plan that we have right now has arbors, has seating areas. It has connections across North Point, because if you go out there now, it's really hard to cross North Point. So what we're focusing on is how do you make it interesting to get across North Point, and making sure that people do want to go across North Point, that is interesting. So it's been fun to look at even crosswalks, coming up with where we're going to use thermoplastic. So we have the brand that we're going to have on the sidewalk, and that will go across North Point. We'll reduce the lanes. We won't take away any lanes, but we'll make it to where people don't have to cross as much pavement, because they just don't want to do that on bicycle or by foot if it's a lot of pavement. So landscaping, and of course, North Point has a huge ridership for MARTA in Alpharetta. So there's so many different stations. It was interesting that when we were coming up with the placemaking, it was important that even those stations have a theme along North Point, because what we heard from the residents is they wanted it to look like something different from anywhere else that you experience in Alpharetta, not the historical district or Avalon or other retail centers. So I think they've kind of knocked it out of the park, and we've had some really good feedback.
Can residents see that online? Is that available?
Yes, absolutely. It's available, and we have that on our North Point LCI section of the website.
Okay, we'll make sure to have a link on that for the podcast. I do like that with North Point. You mentioned the street widths, and a lot of times when we're doing planning for streets and changing it up, it's too narrow, and we don't know how to make, because you have to buy a lot of easements to make it wider.
Correct.
So here we can make it narrow to kind of slow down traffic.
Right.
Still allow the same kind of capacity, but slow it down, which makes it friendlier for pedestrians and for bicyclists. So we can now maybe have cycling lanes, friendlier walks, pedestrian sidewalks there. So
Correct.
There's a great canvas ready for us to make some changes to.
And people like separated bike lanes. So there'll be enough right away to be able to have a separated bike lane. And it was interesting when we were looking at North Point Parkway has the trips have not grown at the percentage other trips in Alpharetta have grown. Now, of course, we've added West Side Parkway since the construction of North Point, but we haven't seen that huge increase. And there was actually 10,000 more trips per day on Main Street than there are on North Point. So there's the opportunity to slow it down without causing a lot of problems with traffic, to slow it down so people can cross, enjoy the greenway, open it up. One of the other things we heard from the public is access to the greenway. Restaurants aren't facing the greenway. There's no connections up to some of those old shopping centers. So that's something that we are talking to all the different property owners out there. I've had a great response so far.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen so far how many people have come in to try to meet the new standards and the placemaking that we've created. It's pretty incredible what we've seen.
And as a city, I find it's good because a lot of times we have these conceptual ideas, but then
right.
we can't bring it forward too much except for just ideas for new development. Whereas we may have an actual chance to partner with capital expenses to help improve those areas too, to
True.
show them how it can be done. So changing up the infrastructure, working with that retention pond area in the near the North Point Mall area.
Right. And that's something that's been really good with the North Point LCI is we didn't want to put it on a shelf. And then, the property owners not even know about it. So we immediately started holding monthly meetings with all the property owners, the mall owners, all the shopping center owners, and said, do you know there's this potential? Do you know that the Alpha Loop, the multi-use trail, is planned on the north side of 400 to tie in? Do you know that the Greenway is back here? So it's interesting how many people weren't even aware of that plan. And then we've had so many people that have dedicated easements to try to make that happen and realize that vision. And we've already seen where the old AMC Theater, they've submitted for a new restaurant and green space along the street. So they're all trying to create that pedestrian experience and connect people over to the Greenway.
So one of the big key features that popped up during when North Point Mall came in for the old Sears site was the retention pond park.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's something that we're seeing, everywhere in the U.S. with redevelopment. The one that's closest to us, of course, is Fourth Ward, and in the historic Fourth Ward in Atlanta, where they were able to take retention, which usually people want out of sight, out of mind, and make it something to where it's an amenity. And what we saw with the mall submittal, with the tear down of the Sears and the green space and everything that they're adding, they actually want to make it a public park. So they're showing a canopy walk similar to what the Botanical Gardens has. So these would be, raised walks in order to kind of meander through the trees and not be as disruptive as you could be just by putting, steps down to the lower part. They even show a fishing pier on some of the water that exists. So there's opportunities there to really bring a great park to the city. And I believe it was $4 million that they're putting into the first phase of that park.
Oh, that'll be good. That's a good way to break up between the retail focus and the residents that we're going to have there, and just a place to unwind and relax, that you don't feel compelled to buy things or do something, that you get like a true public park.
And that's a good point, because it's going to turn into more of just more recreational activities at the mall. I mean, right now, of course, it's a drive and park and go shopping, and then you drive to the next location. But with the mall removing one of the roads on the ring road and making that a bike and pedestrian lane that'll be separated, you've immediately created another experience, especially when you have the Alpha Loop on the north side tying into Encore, which of course was reconstructed a couple of years ago, and then you'll be able to get into the mall. So it's the start of something really great for that infrastructure.
So let's talk about Encore Park. So now with North Point Mall, the North Point LCI, which LCI means what for
Livable Centers Initiative.
I always want to call it Livable Community
Yes,
Initiative.
and that's a program.
Why I asked you.
And that's a program by the Atlanta Regional Commission, and they've given us a lot of funding.
They've given us a lot of funding, and then within the North Point LCI, you are now going to connect North Point to the Greenway, which is on the east side, right? And talking more about connections there, but then also connect to what you've been working on for a few years now, the Alpha Loop. Right?
Mm-hmm. Since 2016, actually.
So it's getting up there, but there's been a lot of movement with the Alpha Loop there. So what is the Alpha Loop? What areas is that contained by? And what's been our newest openings there?
Well, the Alpha Loop is actually an 8-mile multi-use trail. It's going to be similar to the Beltline. Of course, not the density around the Beltline. Our idea was to look at existing jobs, existing activity centers, and residential nodes, and try to connect those, just to give people other options. I mean, you see more people biking and walking, similar to what we're doing at North Point. So back in 2016, it was the former mayor, Belle Isle, that met with staff and said, how do we connect these activity areas. So we started looking at that and looked at existing easements that we already had, easements where we could go ahead and run that trail. We went from an original, it should be 8 foot wide to 12 foot
Which
feet.
is very good.
Yes,
Proponent of the
yes.
wide sidewalks.
We've done a lot of tours, a lot of looking at materials, and of course, we worked with developers to make sure that what they installed again wasn't something. It was a good experience because we didn't want them to just clear and then put an on-grade flat sidewalk. In a lot of areas that people will see when they use this, it's raised so we could keep the trees and meander around the trees, but. It was important to try to connect those jobs and the activity centers. We were looking at the connections, which go from City Center over to Avalon. That's the 1 mile section that's under development. There's a missing 300-foot section right now. And then we have, of course, from Avalon over to North Winds, which is at the corner intersection of Haynes and 400. And then over to the mall, then running on the north side of 400. So within that area, we found that there's 15,000 jobs that exist, 700,000 square feet of restaurant and retail. So that's a lot of connections just with what's there right now that people can start enjoying. But it was important that we have the Greenway, which is more set back in the natural experience, and this will actually take people to goods and services, jobs, and of course be used as a recreational.
The Greenway
purposes.
could become more of a mode of transit, but it's more recreation, exercise from neighborhoods, but not helping you get from destination A to destination B.
Right.
Whereas the Alpha Loop is now could be more of a transportation network.
I agree. Yes, that's what will happen. It'll be a more of the busier node where all the jobs are located, the retail services. So that's something that's in probably that's been the most popular project that I've had.
Yeah.
I haven't had any negative comments about this, and most of the time, homeowners are coming and saying, "How can we connect to this?" And I know everybody doesn't want to connect to it, but.
Yep.
It's something that people, I think, are looking forward to as a different type of recreational experience.
Well, I'll have you know, so I received emails, and you were the topic. Alpha Loop was saying we'd like to hear more about the Alpha Loop. So I would agree. I keep hearing more, and then you were my first show request for it. So that's why you're here today, because of audience feedback.
Well, there's section of the Alpha Loop too that will have art. I mean, Arts Alpharetta is looking at areas to put sculptures. There'll be different experiences along the trail at different locations. What was interesting is when we started looking at how we can make these connections, a lot of people don't know, but there's an existing trail that runs behind Village Tavern.
Yes.
Doesn't connect to Old Milton, but with the Alpha Loop, it will connect to Old Milton. And of course, the developer there on Old Milton has already built their section of the Alpha Loop that will connect. But that was zoned back in the 90s. It built in the late 90s, and at that time, when Amley built that, they put in the trail system. Of course, it's only a 5 foot wide, but we had a lot of existing infrastructure that we could take and make those connections. And talking about the residents, we've also had just a great response from property owners too.
Yep. So one of the big reasons why we had this podcast is to share stories of people that are trying to make a difference in their community, but help others learn what they can do to put their own passions into real life and get it done. You've done a great job of having the Kathi Roadshow program and going to see developers and residents. What advice do you have for people that are trying to have their own initiative that they want to complete, but then going out and visiting others?
Well, they could definitely ask city staff what is needed in the city, because one thing that's needed is somebody to kind of, even with the Alpha Loop, with the nonprofit. I mean, you think about how the Beltline was built. Beltline has a nonprofit that was started that actually goes and gets private funding to help with the completion. So we really could use someone like that working, to work with the private property owners who are very excited about this. But there's really hasn't been an organization that works with the private property owners. And of course, government is not that entity to work with the with that type of private funding. And we do have people that do want to give private funds. So I think that would be a big help and that's what's been made the difference, even with the Beltline and other multi-use trails in different cities. So I think that's one. And then, of course, we've had Arts Alpharetta, which is a different topic, but we've had a lot of people interested in joining that. So there are different organizations in the city.
Is that the missing piece right now? You think
I think it is. I mean, I think it is. I think that's what will make the difference, because we've had the CID Community Improvement District that they have helped and given some funding. But a lot of times, in order to move a project along, you're going to have some of that private funding. And what I've seen from a lot of the office owners, the office developers, is that something that they want to do, but they want, to see that plan, see that organization working toward that goal.
So is that something that you see as a commission kind of within the government, or as a third party nonprofit or friends of?
I think it's a friends of nonprofit in order to just to be different from the city. Of course, they would want to talk to the city, get all of the plans, and see what's we can help with all of that. But I think that would help push it along.
And we've had a lot of those examples done through things like the CID, Community Improvement Districts, of third parties helping with the city to get a group of people that have common interests in getting things accomplished. And we just don't have that for the Alpha Loop right now.
We don't. We need somebody to kind of champion that, the nonprofit, that section, working with the private property owners.
Now, so we have the Greenway and the Alpha Loop. Do you see more residential corridors connecting to our hubs, whether it's downtown and North Point, so it can kind of feed into those networks, like whether it's the Alpha Loop and the Greenway?
I think that's important for it to be successful, to get all of those connections. And I've already had some homeowners reaching out about how they can connect to that main section. And there's many ways. I mean, people have existing detention areas, common areas. So that's something that we'll look at for those that are interested in making those connections. But one of the big projects that we're working on for next year with our comprehensive land use plan update, that'll be the big update. Well, we need to put a city master plan trail system in our comprehensive land use plan. So that's something that we're starting this year in-house to do as much of that as we can and try to get those connections on paper, get it adopted into our comp plan. Because honestly, in 2016, when we came up with the Alpha Loop, we didn't have any plans in our comprehensive land use plan or any requirements for it. So we had to really work with developers, people that were under development, and say, this is good for you if you build this or give us this land. So what we do need to do is for people to have it in a plan so people can see that plan of all the future connections.
That trail master plan, I think, is much needed. We've from Parks and Recreation, we've talked about that from a master planning perspective of having that too, and it hasn't really been done because it's a big thing to try to tackle.
It really is.
And I think for me as a resident personally, I think every homeowner, every resident should be able to get out of their neighborhood and have a 10-minute walk to something,
Agreed.
Something public. It doesn't have to, not retail, not just, another place commercial, but just a public place to go and relax. And so that master plan could help quite a bit to see how people can go to different areas within Alpharetta. So, so you mentioned the comprehensive plan. So is that a way that residents can get involved in the planning process?
Yes, that's an important document that we will be having our 10-year update that will start next year. So we'll have several meetings. I think we'll have 4 different public meetings trying to get input on the existing comprehensive land use plan and try to get the information so we can give it to council and work it into our plan. We'll be able to make recommendations. But I do believe that one of the important portions of that is going to be that trail master plan.
Okay. And then within that, so you're going to have public meetings, but then also it typically breaks off into a committee. So if anybody's interested in joining that committee, they could email you or any elected officials as well, right?
Yes, because what we'll do is ask the elected officials to appoint people to that board, but we'll also put some different board members, like from Design Review Board. It may have one member from Design Review Board or Board of Zoning Appeals, but we definitely need council to send us some names of people interested.
Well, good. Well, Kathi, I want to thank you for spending the time and talking with me about all the different neat things that you're working on and helping Alpharetta improve. But so where can people find out more if they want to get involved? What website?
I think that they should actually email me if it's an involvement.
I thought you were going to say email me.
Yeah, well, that's it.
You were getting ready to point that finger.
No, you know how I've got to. Yeah, I've got to stay involved. So probably just emailing me, and I can help them with that. Now, if they're just looking for general information about placemaking and what we've created at North Point, we have that on our website under the North Point section. Really neat. They should look at it. Some really out-of-the-box new signage and just different placemaking.
Both items. The North Point Initiative and Alpha Loop can be found at alpharetta.ga.us.
That's correct.
And then any questions there, they can email you at kcook@alpha. Well, that's right.
That's
kcook@alpharetta.ga.us.
That would be great.
And of course, you can always email me at jbinder@alpharetta.ga.us. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close the show?
I don't think so. I just it's fabulous working for a great mayor and council, of course.
Well, thanks again for coming on, Kathi. Don't forget to look for North Fulton Serves podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the show. You can follow me on Twitter at Jason Binder or jasonbinder.com, and be sure to tune in every Thursday for a new episode. Thank you for listening.